The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Hello, I'm Dr. Emerson. I'm Medical Director at Eden Valley Lifestyle Center. I wanted to talk to you today about obesity, weight control, as it's part of the insulin resistance syndrome. We want to ask ourselves, what causes people to be too heavy? Most of us have been brought up with the idea that it's too many calories in, too few calories out, and that will cause weight gain. But we want to look at a group later on that actually is no more active than the average American, eats 30% more calories than the average American, and yet weighs 20% less. We want to show you how you too can actually eat more and weigh less. How is obesity defined? Well, it's defined as a body mass index. That's your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared, and that's called the body mass index, BMI for short. A normal BMI is 20 to 25. Overweight is 25 to 30. Obese is 30 to 40. Morbidly obese is over 40. Morbid means disease or sickness, and we find that obesity can indeed cause disease and sickness. Now, you don't actually have to calculate your body mass index. There are charts that are available where you look across the top and you find your weight, and then you move down to your height to find your body mass index. And as you move down looking for your height, you may find that you're too short for your weight. How big a problem is obesity? Well, in America, as of 2002, 1 in 4 American adults have it. It costs $17 billion a year to treat the diseases that are made worse by obesity, and it killed about 300,000 Americans each year. It contributes to medical problems such as diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, sleep apnea, gallstones, and osteoarthritis, making these problems worse, more difficult to control. It actually also increases your risk of sudden death. The risk increases dramatically when your body mass index goes over 29. Your risk of premature death, if you're in the obese range, increases by 50 to 100%. But even mild degrees of being overweight, 10 to 20 pounds, can confer an increased risk of death, especially in the 30 to 64-year-old age group. Now, apart from the health risks, there's also a social stigma. People don't like to be overweight. In fact, if I want to talk to a group of nurses about a health topic, if I'm making rounds, all I have to do is start talking to one of the nurses about weight control, and boom, the whole nursing floor is there and they want to hear about it. It's a topic, it's a hot topic usually on the floors. How does obesity rank in terms of prevalence? Is it growing in problem, or is it being alleviated? And actually we're finding that it is increasing at alarming rates in terms of prevalence. On the West Coast tends to lag behind the East Coast in terms of the prevalence of obesity. We're usually 5% less in prevalence on the West Coast. But we're finding that every 10 years, the prevalence has been increasing since about 1991 by about 10% every 10 years or so. On the West, it used to be anywhere from 10% or less as of 1991, but as of 2008, it has increased to somewhere around 20 to 25% on the West, and on the East Coast, in the 1990s, it was 10 to 14%, and now it's increased to 25 to 30%. The problem is getting to be so bad that actually one of the airlines made a rule that if you were too large to fit in one space, you were required to buy 2 spaces. And I remember seeing a little cartoon. It showed this beanpole of a guy going up to the airline ticket agent, and she's responding and saying, "No, sir, we cannot sell you half a ticket." So he wasn't able to get a discount for being thin. How do we treat obesity? How do we solve the problem? First of all, does a low-calorie diet work? Newsstands carry a new diet every month. These are usually low-calorie diets. Presumably, they have a new low-calorie diet every month because the last one didn't work. The issue of McCall's, January 1992, ran a story about Oprah. She had lost 67 pounds 2 years previously, and all the world rejoiced. However, the world was very saddened at the time of this article because she had regained all the weight that she had lost. Dr. Calloway, in an interview on the next page, actually reviewed the low-calorie diets and showed that her failure was predictable, that it was expected, and then he goes on to explain why it's predictable, why a low-calorie diet is actually doomed to failure and will actually cause increased weight gain in the long run. The page describing the interview had a picture of her, and the captions showed slender or starved. And the question is, do we have to be starved in order to be slender? We want to actually find that, give evidence today that no, you don't have to be starved to be slender. Well, where did our understanding that low-calorie diets were not helpful actually begin? It started around 1959. Stunkard and McLaren-Yoon reviewed the low-calorie diets over the previous 30 years, and they found that 7 of them were very good and were considered well conducted. So they looked at those 7, and they found that all but one of them had a maximum weight loss of only 20 pounds or more for less than 30% of the patients. Less than 8% of the patients lost 40 pounds or more. And they asked themselves, why the failure? Why doesn't a low-calorie diet work long-term to help patients lose weight? So to investigate, they did their own study. They looked at the next 100 patients that were coming to their clinic, and they put them on an 800 to 1,500 calorie per day diet. Now, to give you perspective, a normal adult male usually take about 2,500 to 3,000 calories per day. So they were getting less than half the normal amount of calories per day. At the end of the treatment program, only 12 out of the 100 patients lost 20 pounds. After 1 year, only 6 were able to maintain this weight loss, and after 2 years, only 2 out of the initial 100 were able to maintain their weight loss. And they asked themselves, why? Why the dismal failure? Well, they interviewed the patients, and they found that nervousness was one of the problems, weakness. Of course, they had no calories, so of course they were weak. Irritability was another symptom, fatigue, nausea. One patient actually had increased nervousness, developed a schizophrenic reaction. He was admitted to the hospital, and he gradually regained most of the weight he had lost. So the question then is, why doesn't a low-calorie diet work? Well, to look at this, we want to find out actually how God designed our bodies. God actually designed our bodies to adapt to whatever stress we put it under. Do our bodies adapt to exercise? Well, we all know that it does. If we exercise, lift weights, run, our musculature gets stronger to adapt to the stress we're putting it under. But many of us don't consider the fact that possibly our bodies can adapt to starvation also to protect yourself from dying from too few calories. So we want to look at how our bodies adapt to starvation. Two studies give light on this interesting concept. In 1919, the Carnegie nutrition experiment was done. Patients were put on a 1,400 calorie per day diet. Now the body immediately compensated. What happened was the metabolism slowed down, and this would be reasonable. If you lose your job and you don't have money to pay the power bill, you turn your thermostat down. If the body is not taking in the calories it desires, it turns its thermostat down too. The metabolism dropped. Body temperature dropped. Blood pressure dropped. Heart rate dropped. Oxygen consumption dropped. CO2 production dropped. They were burning less calories. They were radiating less heat. They were conserving calories. And they became much less active. If you've ever been on a water fast, cutting back the calories dramatically, after a day or two, your energy level is at a low point. You might be looking out the window and say, that's an interesting bird. I'd like to get a closer look at it. And you're about to get up and you think, maybe I'll just sit here and not look at the bird because the energy level's so low. This is what they noticed in that Carnegie experiment. When they came off the diet, the fast, the low-calorie regime, they found that they actually gained more weight than they had initially lost during the starvation period. Well, later, after World War II, they did another study. They were going to go into free starvation victims, and they found that if they fed these starvation victims too fast, they died suddenly. Heart would stop. And so they needed to study starvation and how to refeed starvation victims. So they took 32 conscientious objectors and they put them on a semi-starvation diet for 6 months. The normal things that you expected would happen happened. Of course, the metabolism slowed down. They were starting to conserve calories again. They became much less active. What they then found was that the weight dropped as well, and this wasn't surprising. The muscle mass dropped to about 60% of normal. The body fat also dropped to about 33% of the original body fat weight. And the metabolism was much lower. This was at the end of 6 months. Then they refed them. They gave them their normal calorie intake, and what surprised them was the response the body had to this refeeding. As they refed them, the muscle mass slowly increased. At the end of a year, it was still a couple pounds below what it was before the fast. The metabolism also slowly increased, but at the end of a year, it was still several notches below what it was before they started the fast. But body fat jumped up, and at 33 weeks, it was about 10 pounds more than the body fat weight before their fast. It jumped and peaked at about 32 weeks, slowly came down, but at the end of 1 year, the body fat was still 2 to 3 pounds above what it was before the fast. The question is, why did the body do this? Why did the metabolism come up only slowly and stay below what it was before the fast? Why did the muscle mass not come back up to normal but stayed below normal? And why did the body fat go very high, above what it was before the fast, and only slowly come down toward normal, still remaining a couple pounds above what it was before the fast? Well, the body was again adapting to starvation. At the end of the starvation period, at 6 months, the body now was refed, and the body said, you know, we've just come through 6 months of starvation. We now have calories. We'd better prepare for the next starvation. So, to prepare for the next starvation, we're going to keep the muscle mass low so we have less muscle to feed. We're going to keep the metabolism low so that we're burning fewer calories so that we can save more calories in the terms of fat. And we're going to keep the body fat high, higher than it was, so that when the next starvation comes, we'll have more fat to feed, less muscle with. And this is what the body does. In countries where there are annual famines, they find that the people, when the crops come in, will become obese. When the crops are eaten up and they go into starvation, they become very thin, low muscle mass, low metabolism, and when the crops come in again, they become obese. And they go through this cycle, and this is what protects them from starvation. We have found that this concept of the body adapting to starvation also works with dieters and wrestlers. In high school, we used to do something which is not advisable, but we would stop eating for a day or two to try to lower our weight so that we would make weigh-ins to wrestle at a lower weight class. Then, once we made weigh-ins, we would eat and eat to try to get our calorie intake up so we would have energy to wrestle. This is called weight cycling. The body, however, adapts to this weight cycling as well, and they found that in a study with wrestlers, the ones that weight cycled, that would cut their calories, cut their calories and eat, had a lower resting metabolic rate than wrestlers that did not weight cycle. And of course, with wrestling, you want all the metabolism you can. You don't want a low metabolic rate. They've also looked at obese, actually non-obese patients. They took 1,000 of these and they looked at them to see if weight cycling affected them as well. And they found that if these weight cyclers had been on a low-calorie diet for a week or more, 4 times or more over the previous year, that their metabolism was lower than the women that had not done the weight cycling. They then looked at patients who were put in a hospital or at home and placed on a low-calorie diet. And they wanted to find out if the body remembers its experience with a low-calorie diet. So the first group was in an outpatient program. They put them on a restricted calorie diet. It was actually a low-carb diet, 800 to 1,500 calories a day. And they found that as outpatients, the first time they did it, they lost 0.19 kilograms per day. They then took them off the diet, and the patients regained not just the weight they'd lost, but 120% of the weight they'd lost. They actually gained more weight than they lost, which was not too unexpected. They then said, well, okay, we'll put them on the diet again. The second time they put them on the low-calorie diet, this time they only lost not 0.19 kilograms per day, but 0.15 kilograms per day. They were losing weight at a slower rate. And I thought, well, what's going on here? It's not working as well as it did the first time. So let's go and try to correct the problem. Maybe they're cheating. Maybe they're eating more than they're supposed to, because after all, they're doing this at home. We can't really monitor them. So let's put them in the hospital. And sure enough, they put them in the hospital, put them on the same low-calorie diet, and yes, they did lose weight at a faster rate the first time they did this. They found that they lost 0.47 kilograms per day, which was losing weight at a faster rate than as an outpatient. When they came off the diet, again, they regained 115% of the weight they had lost. They actually gained more weight than they had lost. So they put them back in the hospital, monitored very closely how many calories they were taking. They were on the same program, but this time they didn't lose 0.48 kilograms per day. They lost 0.37 kilograms per day. And the question is, why were they losing weight at a slower rate? Well, what was happening was the body was now remembering what had happened before. The first time they went on the low-calorie diet, the body said, I think she's going on a low-calorie diet. We better turn down the metabolism. And it did it more slowly, more gently, and there was a slowing down of the metabolism, but there was still some significant weight loss. She had calories. The body said, we better get ready for the next starvation. So they regained more weight than they lost. The second time she went through the low-calorie diet, the body says, she's doing it again. We recognize this. We better shut down the metabolism faster, sooner, protect her more quickly. The metabolism shuts down faster, and the weight loss drops. In other words, the rate of weight loss decreases, and they lose weight more slowly because the body is now conserving calories more aggressively and more starting sooner. So, why do these low-calorie diets not work? Well, again, to review, a low-calorie diet causes weight gain in the long run because the body is trying to conserve calories for the next starvation. It stores them as fat, keeps the muscle mass low, and keeps the metabolism low. This is how the body responds to starvation. In the long run, starvation diets are tolerated poorly. We just don't tolerate being starved, and we tend to go off of those starvation diets, and when we do, that's when the weight rebound occurs. We have a problem with repeated starvations or diets because the more times we repeat the process, the more the body responds by increasing the weight. Well, the next question then comes is, what about the Atkins diet? I've had friends that go on the Atkins diet and they lose weight, at least initially. When was the Atkins diet actually introduced? Well, it was actually introduced around 1860 by William Banting. This is not a new program. The Atkins diet is essentially a low carbohydrate diet and a high protein and high fat diet. Now, the reason it's high protein, high fat is because we only get calories from three sources. Most generally speaking, we have carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Some people include alcohol, but that's not one we want to use. Many risks involved with alcohol intakes. If you decrease one of those, generally you then have to concentrate on the other two. So a low-carb diet pushes you to a high-protein, high-fat diet. Well, this Atkins diet really became a craze around 2004 in America. Many low-carb alternatives were being put out and promoted to people, and the market was buying them avidly. It was similar to the 1980s low-fat options that were being offered at that time. Well, what is a low-carb diet? Well, in general, the central nervous system needs about 130 grams of carbohydrates per day. This is because the brain, the central nervous system, can only burn carbohydrates. It can't burn fats. There's also a need in the nutritional status of our system to get nutrients, vitamins, and minerals. And these vitamins and minerals are basically found mainly in the plant products. And in order to get enough nutrients, they recommend not just 135 grams a day, but 225 to 325 grams of carbohydrates per day to guarantee enough of the vitamins and minerals to be taken in. Because the Atkins diet avoids the carbohydrates, it has to avoid the plant foods, and so there are some nutrient deficiencies, and the Atkins diet requires you to take the supplements in order to compensate for this. Does the Atkins diet meet either of these requirements? Actually, no. It starts at about 20 grams per day and then slowly increases to 60 grams a day, nowhere near the 135 grams needed for the central nervous system or the 200 to 300 grams needed for your nutrition. Well, does the Atkins diet work? Well, it does cause weight loss initially, and the question is why? Well, when they observed the people on the Atkins diet, what they found was that there was no official calorie restriction, but the people were only eating about 66% of their normal calorie intake. Well, why were they only eating 66% of their normal calories? Because they weren't telling them to restrict their calories. what they found was that their appetite was suppressed. They had no desire for any more of the foods that were available because there was just protein and fat, mainly, very little carbohydrates, and it was the carbohydrates that were replenishing or satisfying the appetite, and without those, they had a suppressed appetite. So they hypothesized, is it possible that the reason people on the Atkins diet lose weight is because of calorie restriction? Well, they did a test to find out. They took 25 people, paired them up, and they had a test group and a control group. The test group was, of course, the Atkins group, and they were on the Atkins diet, the low carbohydrate diet. And each of them was paired with another person on a low calorie diet, a regular diet, lots of carbohydrates, but they restricted their calories to match the Atkins calorie intake. So the Atkins calorie intake were spontaneously eating, only about 66% of their normal calorie intake. The low-calorie diet was forced to be restricted to match the Atkins group. And when they went out after about 6 weeks, they found that both groups lost weight at exactly the same rate. They found that neither of these diets was tolerated well, and the Atkins diet had a lot of other complications, vitamin, mineral deficiencies. It raised the low-density lipoprotein levels, and which is hazardous. So that the Atkins group and the low-calorie group were both causing weight loss from low-calorie intake. And of course, when you have a low-calorie intake and you stop and come off it, you get a weight rebound. Side effects for the Atkins group were constipation, because there's no fiber in the diet, weakness, because there's no calories, headache, bad breath, muscle cramps, diarrhea, and rash. And you needed to compensate with lots of vitamins, minerals, vitamin A, C, and E. So in review, the low-calorie diets are actually doomed to failure because of calorie restriction, and the body then compensating for a low-calorie diet by putting on more weight after the diet is stopped, and the metabolism lowering, body fat increasing, muscle mass decreasing to compensate for this starvation that you put it through. We're going to look next time at exercise. Is this the solution to a weight problem, or are there other solutions that we need to look at? So for now, we hope that you can follow through on the next program, where we can look at these other possible sources of the obesity problem in America. We look forward to seeing you again next time, and for now, may God bless. Thank you.
The following